So if you could, he must have left that when he was, yeah. So he was so good to accommodate because I had booked it at 12:30 and he was like, I'll take everyone out, and he just sort of did something out there and finished up. Okay, so yeah. Okay. For the sake of time, I'd like to begin. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. On behalf of the Health and Wellness Center and Accessibility and the Mental Health Network, we like to thank you for appreciating this message that we'd like to deliver today. We know that mental health is in the media a lot, especially around post-secondary students, and we want to be able to support them in our roles for them to be successful for those who need it. But we're not open all the time, and whether our services are directly servicing the students with regards to mental health or indirectly with our supportive programming, we want to make sure that we have resources that we can offer students, and students are aware of options that are available so that they can receive the help that they need to. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Fiona O'Connor, and she'll introduce herself and tell a little bit about what she does with a new hotline called Good2talk.
Thanks, Elsa. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for all coming out to today's info session. It's great to see a full room of people who want to learn about our service. So my name is Fiona O'Connor, and I'm the Partnership Coordinator for Good2talk, which is the new post-secondary student helpline. Today's info session we have until I think 2 o'clock, so I'd like to spend the next 20 minutes just kind of going through some slides that will give you an overview of our service, tell you what we are, how and why we came about, how students can actually use our helpline. And then from there I'd like to open it up for some questions and discussion, and time permitting we have a few simulated call snippets that I can play for you just to help you get a sense of what happens when a student calls our helpline. So I'll get started right away. Just before I do though, I'm wondering if I can get a show of hands of where everyone is coming from at the university. So in terms of health and wellness staff, how many people here are from health and wellness? Accessibility services, okay. Residents, housing, okay. Security, I see a few. What about academic advisors? Are there any? Okay, representing, that's good. Are there student leaders here? I see a few, okay. Great, okay. That helps me get a sense of where everyone is coming from. So, so to get started, what is Good2talk? So we were created as part of the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities Mental Health Innovation Fund, which many of you might know saw a large number of initiatives related to post-secondary mental health kind of launched in the last year. And so Good2talk, what we are is a free, confidential, and anonymous helpline that offers professional counseling and information and referrals for mental health, addictions, and well-being, specifically for post-secondary students throughout the province. We're a bilingual service, so we are Good2talk in English and Allo j'écoute in French. And we're a service that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as Elsa mentioned. So really what we are is the two main features of our service are counseling and information and referral services. And I'll get into that in a bit more detail in a moment. In terms of who Good2talk serves, so we were created specifically to meet the needs of college and university students in Ontario. And we're a service that's really geared towards students aged 17 to 25. Obviously, we know there are many students who are over the age of 25, and certainly anyone who calls the helpline is going to be served, so we wouldn't turn anyone away. However, our training for our counselors and our outreach to students really focuses on the 17 to 25 age range, in part because that comprises the vast majority of post-secondary students in the province. So if a student who is a mature student calls our helpline and selects counseling as opposed to information and referral, that caller will have their needs assessed by our counselor, but it may result more in a focus on needs assessment and referral to appropriate service either on campus or in the community. So we're geared towards 17 to 25, but we're certainly tracking that demand that we may be receiving from mature students. I'd like to give you just a little bit of context in terms of how Good2talk as a service is defining and understanding mental health. So we really do take a kind of holistic understanding of the term, recognizing that students transitioning from high school to post-secondary really face a unique set of challenges, whether that be diagnosable mental illnesses that may be emerging or being discovered as students transition to post-secondary, whether that be eating disorders, substance abuse or addictions challenges, anxiety disorders, or suicidal ideation. But we also know that there are a vast range of other mental health challenges that students face, anxiety and stress being a big one. I'm sure most of you know that much better than me, that is a big one that students are facing. But everything that relates to that, so whether that's employment concerns, financial stress, relationship challenges, financial is obviously a big one, student debt and so on. All of these contribute to the state of mental health and wellness of students. And our counselors and information and referral specialists are specifically trained to support students experiencing this range of challenges. Recognizing, of course, that Good2talk is an in-the-moment support. We use, on the counseling side, a brief solution-focused approach to therapy. So we're not necessarily a resource for long-term counseling, but our staff are equipped to meet the needs of both diagnosed mental illnesses as well as other mental health factors that students may need in the moment support for. I'd like to just give you a little bit of background on Good2talk and who's behind the service. So we're funded by the ministry, as I mentioned, but there are 4 organizations that banded together to create the helpline. The first is Connects Ontario, and I'll delve into a bit more detail about what each service brings to Good2talk, but very briefly, Connects Ontario provides the information and referral aspect of our service that's specifically focused on mental health and addictions. Kids Help Phone, as many of you might know, is a counseling service, and so that's what we bring to Good2talk is that professional counseling. New counselors were hired specifically for the service. Ontario 211 is a third partner to Good2talk, and they also do information and referral like Connects Ontario, but they do so in the context of Good2talk for any needs that are not specifically related to mental health and addictions. And I'll explain that a bit more in a moment. And then the fourth partner behind Good2talk is the Ontario Centre of Excellence for Child and Youth Mental Health, who are leading our evaluation and who led our training for the helpline. So here I'd like on this slide just to kind of walk you through what the caller's experience is. So what actually happens when a student calls Good2talk. There are 2 points of access to our service. So we have a 1-866 number, which you'll find on our promotional materials. So students can call that number, and it's a direct connection to Good2talk. But they may also access our service through 211, which is obviously a much easier number to remember. But if they do choose to access through 211, they just have to ask to be connected to Good2talk. So once they've got through to the service, whether it be directly through our 1-800 number or through 211, they're asked whether they'd like service in English or French. And from there, they're given 2 service options. One is to speak to a professional counselor, and 2 is to, or vice versa rather, 2 is to get connections to local resources for mental health and addictions. So as I mentioned, those are kind of the 2 main aspects of our service. So once a student has decided, okay, I'd like to speak to a counselor, or I'd like to speak to, we call them INR specialists, but that's not how they're presented to students on the helpline. They're patched through immediately, and someone picks up the phone and they're able to have a conversation about what issue they're dealing with and what kind of support they might need. Through the partnership, we're able to seamlessly transfer callers between the two services. So say a student who has a diagnosed anxiety disorder calls, chooses to receive local connections to supports in their community. And after they've received that referral or some information about wait times, say at a community support, it looks like they might really benefit from having a counseling session with a counselor. They would be transferred to our counselor and would be able to have that counseling session. Vice versa, if a student called and selected to speak to a counselor, we would be able to transfer them over to an I&R specialist. And that's a fairly seamless process. The students don't necessarily, or the callers don't necessarily know that their calls are being directed to two different call centers, but so that you know they are. But through our partnership, we're able to connect everyone through back channel transfers. And of course, 211 is also a service that we can transfer seamlessly to through our partnership, and that's for any information and referral needs that might not specifically be related to mental health and addictions. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through, I have about 4 slides that speak to the backgrounds of each partner. I'll just take you through the highlights of that, and we'll make the presentation available to you. There's a few copies in the back. They might have all been scooped up, but you can kind of read for yourselves a bit more about the organization, so I'll just give you the highlights here. So many of you might know Kids Help Phone as a professional counseling service for youth in Canada aged 5 to 20. We know, interestingly, that at Kids Help Phone, about 30% of the calls they receive, and they receive about, or contacts online and by phone, they receive about, I think it's, I'm not going to quote you a number because I'm drawing a blank on that number, but in total, about 30% of the contacts they receive are from young people aged 17 to 20. So already kind of speaking to that post-secondary age group. Furthermore, of that 30%, about 33 are calling from within Ontario. So that just speaks to the experience of Kids Help Phone's counselors, who are one and the same as Good2talk counselors, their familiarity with that demographic. And just, you can see here from the chart that the primary reason for young people reaching out to Kids Help Phone is mental and emotional health needs. Connects Ontario, our second partner, you may know them through the 3 helplines that they run in the province. That was the card that you showed me before. So the drug and alcohol helpline, the Ontario problem gambling helpline, and the mental health helpline. And what they are really system navigation experts. So they can provide information on treatment services and supports in the community, program and program availability. In some cases, they're able to help callers actually book appointments. And they can give really detailed information about wait times, for example, for in-community or local supports. They have a really massive database of programs and supports related to the 3 services they provide. And in terms of their experience with the 17 to 25 age range, we know that through their mental health helpline, what they're seeing a lot of is non-diagnosed mental health concerns followed by mood disorders. And to their drug and alcohol helpline, 2 of the primary reasons that young people are reaching out for that helpline is concerns around alcohol and cannabis use and abuse. How many of you have heard of 211, or is that, I just like to get a sense of, okay, fairly known. So 211 is obviously a 3-digit phone number that links Ontarians to a range of government and community-based health and social services. So as I mentioned, anything that's not related to mental health or addiction specifically, we would connect students to 211 for some of those information and referral needs. So housing help or income assistance, community services, settlement services, recreational services. These are the kinds of resources that we might refer, make referrals through 211. And of course, they're a secondary access point to our helpline. So That's a little bit about what 2-1 brings to the service. The Ontario Centre of Excellence for Child and Youth Mental Health, as I mentioned, they helped train our counselors and information and referral specialists on some of the specific mental health challenges and realities of post-secondary students, and are also conducting our evaluation. But really what they do is they help child and youth mental health professionals and agencies strengthen their programs and strengthen their services. So they focus on evaluation, implementation, and youth and family engagement. So they're a really great partner to have working with us on the service. So I'd like to here give you a bit of a snapshot. I talk a lot about referrals that we make and how we do that. So through the partnerships, the partnership of Kids Help Phone Connects Ontario and Ontario 2-1, we have a really massive database that we can draw on to make referrals both on and off campus. So this is far from an exhaustive list. We have specific resources collected for every institution and every campus in our database that we can connect students with, but these are just some of the examples that we would have that we would be able to refer students to. So mental health programs, health and wellness services on campus, sexual health centers or sexual assault centers, for example, accessibility services, international student centers, really the gamut of on and off campus supports that would be relevant to the needs of college and university students. So moving right along, when we were doing focus groups to develop the helpline, one of the things that we heard fairly regularly from students was that it was really important to know who would be answering the phones and to know that they would be professionals. So here I'd just like to give you a quick snapshot of what our counselors and information and referral specialists, what their expertise are. So they're all required to have degrees in relevant disciplines as well as a minimum of 3 years experience, relevant experience in the social services or health services. They also are required to have experience in crisis intervention and either phone counseling or phone information and referral. And they're all ASSIST trained, so that's applied suicide intervention skills training. They all receive extensive on-the-job training. They go through fairly rigorous hiring processes. And they all have ongoing individual and group supervision, assessment of clinical skills, as well as professional development like community of practice meetings or specialized training sessions that we do either at Kids Help Phone or Connects Ontario. So those are some of the qualifications and expertise of our staff. And then here, sorry, the text is quite small. I hope it's smaller over there. So this is just a bit of an overview of some of the call trends to date. So the caveat is that we're a really new service. We launched officially in October. And so we're still tracking call trends and seeing what's coming in. So we have here, so we officially launched in October, but our line has actually been live since June. So since that time, we've received almost 3,000 calls with just over 2,000 selecting a service option. And the reason for that discrepancy is, I just like to mention, is that we do get callers who call to test the line, to hear the messaging, and that's absolutely fine, but that means that those calls aren't receiving counseling or information and referral. Because we're a new service, we expect that people are going to call us and kind of scope us out before, whether they're staff or whether they're student, and that's fine. We do know, like broadly speaking, the trends are that more students are selecting counseling than information and referral services at this point. In terms of the main topics of information and referral calls, in the month of December, we see that undiagnosed mental health needs are accounting for about a quarter of the calls. Anxiety disorders and mood disorders are also two common reasons why students are choosing information and referral. And in terms of the counseling, the trends are not completely dissimilar from Kids Help Phone's trends in that the leading reason is mental and emotional health needs, and we know that within that category, that top level category, anxiety is a big topic. And then of course partner relationships and anything related to school or academic pressure and stress. We're receiving calls related to those topics as well. We have a little bit of demographic information here from calls that have gone to the counseling side. It may be unsurprising to you that the majority of those who are reaching out so far have been female students. And we know that the majority of calls so far are coming from universities as opposed to colleges. Just a bit of additional information. Callers are generally between the ages of 19 and 23. We've seen, interestingly, higher call volumes in the middle of the week versus Kids Help Phones, for example. I know that their peak times are often on the weekends, so that's just an interesting difference. And the average wait time for calls is under a minute, so 46 seconds to actually speak to someone. So we're almost wrapped up here. Excuse me. This slide, I just want to give you a sense of how we're evaluating our service. So how do we know that Good2talk is actually meeting needs and working the way it was designed to work? So as I mentioned, the center, as we call them, is leading our evaluation. And they're going to be looking at a really wide range of measures of our service. They'll be tracking, collecting caller demographics, so gender, presenting issue, whether a referral was made or not, whether they're calling from college or university. Because our service is anonymous and confidential, this is probably close to as drilled down as we would get in terms of the demographic information. I think we would also be able to include regional information in there, absolutely, but we won't have necessarily institution-specific data systematically collected, and I can explain why in a moment. Caller satisfaction, so how satisfied are callers with the help they're receiving from Good2talk? Would they recommend it to a friend? And I can again explain in the Q&A if you want how we would be doing measuring this given our anonymity and confidentiality. On-campus staff satisfaction, so what are your experiences with the helpline? How relevant and useful has it been to the work that you do? So we'll be doing focus groups and some consultations with staff on campus. And then improvement in callers' identified outcomes. So Good2talk does have a logic model that looks at things like increases in hope or reductions in perceived stress, increased awareness of personal resources as well as resources on campus or in the community. So kind of looking at that help-seeking component and whether Good2talk is able to kind of push the needle, so to speak, on those outcomes. And then just before we conclude, this is just a quick overview of what we're doing in terms of outreach and communications around the helpline. So I'll be continuing to do information sessions like this. We've kind of focused to date on getting the word out to staff and service providers on campus, as you are the ones who are really on the front lines, potentially referring students. We're going to be launching a student outreach kind of campaign that includes a bit of marketing that builds on what we did in the first semester. So I'll be connecting with student unions and associations as well as health promotion teams. I know there are a few people here, so that's a good starting point. And of course we have a marketing and communications plan that will be launched later this semester. So we're taking it gradually because we are such a new service and we want to make sure that everything we're doing is not only resonating with the student population, but that we really keep service at the forefront of what we do and are able to manage those call volumes and meet student needs. So, yeah, that brings me to the end of the slide portion. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me either at info@good2talk.ca, and I have cards here. So if you need to slip out at any time and you have questions, you can contact me.
Thank you, Fiona.
Yeah.
That concludes our video taping. So we're going to stop the videotape just to protect everyone's privacy with asking questions, but we'll open up the floor to questions for Fiona. Thank you for holding your questions. I hope you've written them down and have them handy so that we can ask Fiona some of the questions. And I'll be taking notes with a few other people of those questions so that we can write them out, and the videotape will be made available for all with a frequently asked FAQ section, and we'll try to capture most of the questions that were asked today for others who missed the presentation. So does anyone have any questions for Fiona?